In 1943, a factory worker's wife in Pittsburgh kept a spotless kitchen. No dishwasher, no paper towels, no cleaning sprays lined up under the sink. She had 4 kids, a husband on shift work, and maybe $3 a week for groceries. Her kitchen was cleaner than yours is right now. Number 14 on this list was taught in home economics classes across America for decades, then quietly dropped from the curriculum when cleaning product companies started sponsoring school programs in the 1970s. Number 7 was so effective that professional restaurant kitchens still use a version of it today, but nobody tells home cooks. Number 3, the one your grandmother probably did without even thinking about it, could cut your daily kitchen cleanup time in half starting tomorrow. These 25 secrets did not come from wealth. They came from people who could not afford a messy kitchen. When you have nothing to spare, you cannot afford a ruined pot, a rotting sponge, a grease fire, or a pantry full of weevils. Necessity made these people the most disciplined, most efficient kitchen workers in American history. Somewhere between the invention of the spray bottle and the rise of the cleaning aisle, we forgot every single thing they knew. Before we start, hit subscribe, because what you are about to learn is not in any cookbook. Let's count down the 25 kitchen secrets that the poorest and most organized households in America use to keep spotless kitchens on nothing. Number 25, the dishpan setup. Before kitchen sinks had 2 basins built in, every working-class kitchen had a dishpan sitting on the counter. It was an enamel or galvanized tub that cost about 30 cents in 1940, and it lasted 20 years. Your grandmother filled it with hot soapy water before she started cooking, not after. That is the secret most people miss. Every bowl, every spoon, every measuring cup went directly into that hot water the moment she was done with it. By the time the meal hit the table, the cooking mess was already half dissolved. Nothing sat, nothing dried on, nothing needed scrubbing. The dishpan was not a washing tool, it was a containing tool. One warm soak made cleanup a 5-minute job instead of a 40-minute war against dried-on food. Number 24, salt on cast iron, never soap. A cast iron skillet in 1935 cost about $1.50. If you took care of it, your grandchildren cooked on the same pan. If you ruined it with soap and water, you threw away $1.50 you could not get back. The trick was coarse salt. After cooking, while the pan was still warm, she would pour in a handful of coarse kosher salt and scrub it around with a folded rag or a crumpled brown paper bag. The salt pulled grease and stuck food right off the surface without touching the seasoning. Rinse with hot water only. Dry immediately over the burner flame and rub with the thinnest coat of lard while warm. The pan stayed black, slick, and ready. No rust, no buildup, no ruined seasoning. A box of salt cost a nickel and lasted months. Number 23, newspaper on shelves. Every pantry shelf, every kitchen drawer, every cabinet bottom in a Depression-era home was lined with newspaper, not shelf paper from the store. Newspaper. It was free, changed weekly, and kept bugs and moisture off the wood. When the page got greasy or damp, you swapped it out in 30 seconds. The fresh print actually repelled certain insects. When flour or sugar spilled, it landed on the paper, not in the cracks of the shelf. Cleaning the pantry was not a twice-a-year project. It was a 10-minute weekly swap. Modern shelf liner costs $8 a roll and somehow works worse. Your great-grandmother lined her entire kitchen with yesterday's newspaper and never had a pantry problem in her life. Number 22, the mason jar pantry system. Everything dry lived in glass. Flour, cornmeal, rice, dried beans, sugar, coffee, oats. Every bit of it went straight from the paper bag into a glass mason jar with a tight metal lid, the moment it came home from the store. A box of 12-quart jars cost about 65 cents in 1945 and was considered a kitchen investment, not an expense. Here is why it mattered. Weevils and pantry moths cannot chew through glass. Moisture cannot get in. You could see exactly how much of everything you had at a single glance without opening anything. Nothing went stale. Nothing got infested. Nothing tipped over and spilled across the shelf. The entire pantry was organized, visible, and sealed in under an hour. We replaced this system with cardboard boxes and plastic bags, and then wondered why we throw away half our dry goods every spring. Number 21. Wipe as you go, not after. Here is the discipline that separated a clean kitchen from a disaster. Your grandmother kept a damp rag folded over the handle of the oven or tucked in her apron strings while she cooked. Every splatter got wiped before it dried. Every drip got caught before it baked on. The stovetop never turned into a fossil record of last week's cooking because nothing was ever allowed to sit longer than 30 seconds. This single habit, wiping surfaces immediately during cooking rather than waiting for after, eliminates about 80% of the scrubbing that modern cooks consider normal. It costs nothing. It takes 10 seconds. And every woman who cooked through the 1930s and 1940s did it automatically because she knew that dried-on grease is a punishment and fresh grease is just a quick wipe. Number 20. Vinegar in the rinse water. When dishes came out of the dishpan, they got a second rinse, not in plain water, but in water with a splash of white vinegar, about a tablespoon in a basin of warm water. The vinegar cut soap residue, left glassware streak-free, and deodorized everything it touched. It also acted as a mild disinfectant on the dish surfaces. A gallon of white vinegar cost about 15 cents and served the whole kitchen for weeks. No spots on the glasses, no soapy film on the plates, no smell left on the rags. Professional kitchen workers still use an acid rinse for exactly this reason. We abandoned it when dish soap companies started selling rinse aids at $4 a bottle that do the same thing vinegar did for a penny a week. Number 19. The soaking rule. The moment a pot came off the stove, it got filled with water. Not sometime before bed, not eventually. The moment cooking was done, water went in. Hot water for a hot pot, cold water for scorched bottoms. This single discipline ended the need to ever soak overnight or scrub with steel wool. Food that has been wet for 5 minutes releases from the pan. Food that has dried for 2 hours is a construction project. There was a rule in organized working kitchens. Nothing sits dry. You fill it, you soak it, you move on. The person who forgets this rule is the person who spends 20 minutes scrubbing a pot that needed 30 seconds of attention 2 hours earlier. Number 18. The one-pot philosophy. This is the first pattern break, and it is a big one. Organized poor kitchens did not use 5 pans for one meal. Not because they did not have them, but because they understood something that modern cooking shows have actively trained us to forget. Every extra dish you dirty is a debt you pay at the end of the meal. A skilled cook plans the entire meal around the minimum number of surfaces and tools. One big pot of stew instead of a roast, a vegetable side, and a separate gravy pan. One skillet for the whole breakfast instead of separate pans for eggs, bacon, and toast. This was not a limitation. It was a philosophy. Food cooked together in one vessel builds deeper flavor, requires less fuel, and leaves almost nothing to clean. Cooking schools teach you to dirty every pan in the kitchen. Your great-grandmother cooked a better dinner on 2 burners with 2 pots and was done cleaning before the meal was finished digesting. Number 17. The flour sack dish towel. Flour came in cotton sacks in the 1930s and the 1940s. A 25-pound bag became a 25-pound piece of usable fabric once emptied. Women washed those sacks, bleached them soft, and cut them into dish towels, dishcloths, aprons, and rags. A flour sack towel was thinner than a modern dish towel, so it dried dishes faster. It was lint-free, so glasses came out clean. It was tightly woven, so it lasted for years. And it absorbed roughly 3 times the moisture of a modern terry cloth towel. Wet dishes left to air dry are a breeding ground for water spots, mildew, and bacteria. When dried immediately with a thin cotton cloth, they were spotless and ready to put away. We switched to thick towels that smear and leave lint because they look better folded on the counter. Number 16. Lemon half on the cutting board. After cutting onions, garlic, fish, or meat on a wooden cutting board, your grandmother rubbed the cut surface with half a lemon. Not sprayed with Lysol, not wiped with a damp cloth. She rubbed firmly with the exposed flesh of half a lemon. The citric acid neutralized the odors at the source rather than masking them. It also pulled up surface stains from berries and beets. The cutting board smelled clean, not covered up. A lemon cost maybe 2 cents. One half did the board, the other half went into the icebox for tomorrow's tea. Nothing wasted, nothing purchased that was not already in the kitchen. This technique works better than any cutting board spray you can buy, and it has been replaced by products that cost 12 times as much and smell like artificial lemon anyway. Number 15. Salt on spills immediately. The moment anything spilled on the stovetop, into the oven, or on the floor, salt went on top of it. Immediately, before anything else. A heavy pour of regular table salt on a fresh spill draws out the moisture, keeps the liquid from spreading, and makes cleanup a matter of sweeping rather than scrubbing. With oven spills, salt applied while the oven was still warm would carbonize the spill so it could be scraped off with a wooden spatula after cooling instead of requiring a cleaning product. On a fresh red wine or beet spill on the floor, salt absorbed it down to nothing in minutes. Your grandmother kept a small open dish of salt right beside the stove for this purpose. It cost almost nothing and prevented the kind of baked-on messes that modern oven cleaners exist to dissolve. Number 14. The weekly drain treatment. Every Sunday night, without exception, boiling water went down every drain in the kitchen. Not drain cleaner, not any product, just the biggest pot your grandmother owned, filled and brought to a rolling boil, then poured slowly down the sink drain. This dissolved the week's grease buildup before it could solidify into a clog. A kitchen that gets a weekly boiling water flush never needs a plumber for grease clogs. The pipe stays clear. The kitchen stays odor-free. This habit cost nothing and took 3 minutes once a week. Drain cleaning products became a billion-dollar industry the year this generation stopped passing down their habits. Here is what those companies do not put on the label. Boiling water still works better for grease than any chemical product they sell. Before the modern refrigerator and the little yellow box in the back, there was the ice box, a wooden or metal cabinet with a block of ice delivered twice a week. Smell control was a real problem. Your grandmother kept a shallow dish of dry baking soda inside at all times, placed near the bottom where cold air pooled. She replaced it every 2 weeks. Baking soda does not mask odors. It absorbs them through a chemical reaction that actually neutralizes acid-based and sulfur-based compounds. Fish smell, onion smell, the faint sourness of aging produce, all neutralized. None of it transferred to the butter or the cream. This is one trick that made it onto the back of the Arm & Hammer box because it actually works. The part that got left out is that the old system used half a cup of plain baking soda in an open dish, not the overpriced ventilated boxes sold today. Number 12. Brown paper for grease. This is the second pattern break, and food companies genuinely hate this one. Before paper towels were marketed to American housewives in the early 1930s, the paper that came home from the grocery was used for everything. The inside of a brown paper bag was laid flat under draining bacon. Pork chops came out of the pan onto brown paper, not a dish. Fried chicken drained on torn brown paper from whatever was delivered to the house that week. Brown paper absorbs grease faster than a paper towel. It is stiffer, so it does not collapse under weight. And it was free because it was already coming into the house. Scott Paper Company spent a significant portion of its early marketing budget convincing women that they needed to purchase paper for a task they had been doing perfectly well with free paper for generations. The paper towel is one of the most effective marketing replacements for something that required zero spending. Number 11. The drying rack and the put-away rule. Every clean dish was dried and put away before the next meal started. Not air dried in a rack overnight, collecting dust and moisture, and then requiring the rack to be emptied before breakfast. Dried by hand, put on the shelf, rack cleared. The dish rack was never a second form of storage. It was a temporary holding area that was cleared at the end of every single cleaning session. This prevented three things at once. First, the buildup of water spots and mineral deposits that air-dried dishes develop. Second, the clutter of a permanently full drying rack, which makes the kitchen feel smaller and more chaotic. Third, the inevitable morning scramble for a bowl that is sitting wet in the rack. A kitchen where everything lives in its place and nothing lives in transition is a kitchen that always looks and runs clean. Number 10. Vinegar and water as the universal spray. There was no cleaning spray, no bottle of blue liquid, no degreaser in the red bottle, no all-purpose cleaner in the yellow jug. There was a spray bottle or a cloth, and there was white vinegar diluted with water at roughly 1:1. That combination cleaned counters, wiped out the icebox, cut through cooking grease on the stovetop, disinfected the cutting board, and deodorized the garbage pail. Every surface in the kitchen. One product. Total cost, about a penny per cleaning session. The cleaning product industry became what it is today by convincing American households that different surfaces require different proprietary solutions. They do not. They require acidity to cut grease, mild abrasion for scrubbing, and rinsing for sanitation. Diluted vinegar handles the first and last. Salt handles the second. Your grandmother cleaned a kitchen that was open from 5 in the morning to 9 at night with nothing else, and it was immaculate. Number 9. The grease jar. This is the third pattern break, and it connects to the most profound difference between how that generation cooked and how we cook today. Beside every stove sat a ceramic jar or a coffee can with a metal lid. Every time she cooked bacon, every time she fried a pork chop, every time she rendered anything with fat in it, the grease went into that jar. It was strained through a metal sieve to remove the browned bits, poured in while hot, sealed, and kept at room temperature. That jar of bacon drippings was not waste. It was the primary cooking fat for the entire week. Eggs fried in bacon grease, cornbread made with bacon grease, green beans cooked down in bacon grease, biscuits cut with bacon grease. This did three things for the kitchen simultaneously. It eliminated the greasy pan sitting in the sink. It provided free cooking fat that required zero grocery spending. And it meant the stovetop never had baked-on grease because hot fat went into the jar instead of being pushed around the pan and left to cool. We replaced this system with non-stick spray, and then spent money on the non-stick spray. Number 8. Newspaper for garbage. Before plastic garbage bags became common, garbage was managed in a completely different way. Vegetable peelings and wet scraps were wrapped in newspaper immediately and carried out to the bin, rather than sitting in an open pail under the sink. The newspaper absorbed moisture, contained the smell inside the package, and made the bin cleanable with a quick wipe instead of a scrub down. A kitchen that packages wet garbage immediately in newspaper produces almost no kitchen odor and requires almost no garbage pail maintenance. The modern plastic bag under the sink holds wet garbage in a warm, closed environment for days at a time, and then we wonder why the kitchen smells. The newspaper method dealt with the problem at the source, rather than containing it and waiting. Number 7. The table cleared and wiped rule. In an organized working-class kitchen from the 1930s through the 1950s, the table was cleared completely and wiped down within 5 minutes of every meal, not left with the butter out for later, not cleared except for the jam jar, not wiped only around the items that were staying, cleared completely, wiped with a damp cloth, reset. This was not about appearances. It was about not allowing the kitchen to accumulate. A table that is always clear is a surface that is always usable. A table that holds the remains of the last meal grows into a table that holds 2 days of mail, a broken toy, 3 coffee cups, and a lost permission slip. The discipline of complete clearing after every single meal prevents the creep of kitchen clutter that turns a functional room into a storage room that also has a stove in it. Number 6. The damp rag rule on the stovetop. Before the meal was plated and brought to the table, before anything else, the stovetop got a quick wipe. Not a deep clean, a 30-second wipe with a damp rag while the burners were still warm. Warm grease wipes clean in one pass. Cold grease requires scrubbing. This single habit, applied at the end of every cooking session while everything was still warm, meant the stovetop never required more than 30 seconds of attention at any given time. Compare that to a modern stovetop that gets cleaned maybe once a week, where the grease has had days to bake and harden and layer over itself. The weekly scrub that modern cooks consider normal is entirely the product of not doing 30 seconds of work when the stovetop was still warm and the grease was still liquid. Number 5. The kitchen rag rotation. Your grandmother did not use one dish rag until it fell apart or started to smell. She had a rotation. Several small cotton rags, cut from old clothing or flour sacks, were in use at any given time. At the end of each day, the used rags were rinsed thoroughly, wrung dry, and hung over the edge of the sink or on a nail near the window. Every 2 days, the whole batch was boiled in a pot with a piece of lye soap for 5 minutes, rinsed in clean water, and hung outside to dry. This killed bacteria and neutralized odors completely, and it cost nothing beyond fuel. The modern sponge is one of the most bacteria-laden objects in the average home, sitting wet in a puddle of its own contaminated water, never properly sanitized, and replaced when the smell becomes unbearable. The old rag rotation that required boiling water and a nail on the wall produced a cleaner, safer kitchen surface wiper for zero ongoing cost. Number 4. Cornmeal for cast iron cleaning. This is the 4th pattern break, and it is one that the cast iron revival on social media keeps almost getting right, but never quite landing. Before salt became the go-to, the original cast iron cleaning method in Appalachian and Southern kitchens was dry cornmeal. Pour a handful into the still warm pan, work it around with a folded rag or a stiff brush, and the cornmeal grabs every particle of food residue through gentle abrasion without touching the iron surface. The cornmeal absorbs grease, pulls up bits, and can be emptied out and composted. Nothing wet touches the pan. Nothing strips the seasoning. A pound of cornmeal cost about 7 cents and cleaned a skillet as well as any product on the market. It did not fade because it stopped working. It faded because it required no purchase and therefore could not be sold to you. Number 3. Never leave the kitchen dirty. This is the rule that every single other rule on this list served. In the households that ran the cleanest kitchens on the least money, there was an absolute standard that did not bend. The kitchen was clean before you went to bed. Not mostly clean, not almost clean. Clean. Counters clear and wiped. Dishes washed, dried, and put away. Stovetop wiped. Floor swept. Table cleared. This was not a high standard. It was the baseline. Here is what it produces. You wake up to a clean kitchen, which means you start the day without the psychological weight of yesterday's mess. You start cooking in a clean space, which means you work faster and more efficiently. You have full use of every surface because none of them are occupied by the last meal. And the cleaning never accumulates into a crisis because it is dealt with in small, regular installments rather than ignored until it becomes overwhelming. The families who could not afford chaos built a habit that costs nothing and produces a kitchen that functions beautifully every single day. Number 2. Hot water. As the first response. Before any cleaning product, before any scrubbing, before any soaking solution, the first response to anything in the kitchen was hot water. Spill on the floor, hot water. Sticky residue on the shelf, hot water. Baked on spot in the bottom of a pot, hot water. The reason this worked is that almost everything in a kitchen that needs cleaning is either fat-based or protein-based. Hot water melts fat, and it begins breaking down protein. Anything you hit with genuinely hot water within a reasonable time after it was created does not require a cleaning product. It requires patience and temperature. The cleaning product industry grew by introducing the idea that hot water was not enough. It usually is. For everything that hot water does not handle, salt and vinegar cover the remaining 90%. Most households that spend $40 or $50 a month on cleaning products need hot water, salt, and salt and vinegar. That is about $1.50 a month. Number 1. Clean while you cook. This is the most important kitchen secret that organized poor kitchens in American history carried as their highest principle, and it is the one that requires no product, no purchase, no tool, and no skill, except the willingness to change a habit. While water boils, wash the bowl you just used. While the onions soften, wipe down the counter you just chopped on. While the roast is in the oven, dry and put away the last of the prep dishes. The meal and the cleaning happen simultaneously, not sequentially. By the time the food is on the table, the kitchen behind you is essentially clean. There are no dishes piled in the sink during dinner. There is no mountain of pots waiting when the plates are cleared. There are only the final meal dishes, which take 15 minutes, and then the kitchen is done for the night. This one habit, cooking and cleaning as a single continuous act rather than two separate events, is the reason your grandmother could run a full kitchen for a family of 6 without help, without a dishwasher, and without ever ending the day standing in front of a disaster she had to talk herself into facing. Here is what I want you to try this week. Just pick one. The soaking rule, the damp rag wipe on the warm stovetop, the salt on the cast iron, or the clean while you cook principle. Try one for 7 days and tell me in the comments whether your kitchen changed. I tested all 25 of these, and the clean while you cook rule alone cut my after-dinner cleanup from 40 minutes to under 10 minutes. The grease jar is back on my stovetop. The newspaper lines my pantry shelves, and I have not bought a single cleaning product in 3 months. These were not just habits, they were the systems of people who understood that a messy kitchen is expensive and they could not afford it. Now you know what they knew.